Well, I'm not sure what you mean by literally changing their gender.
Well, through steroids or changes in surgery, chemically, biologically, transforming themselves.
Going through hormonal or surgical treatment, no, is not a prerequisite. There are people who are who are transgendered, who have not gone through hormone therapy or surgery.
So I guess I'm confused. So and maybe my vocabulary is out of date. So if someone is expressing themselves as a man is expressing themselves as a woman, and they dress as a woman and they make themselves up as a woman, but they're still a man, and my vocabulary is probably out of date, that used to be referred to as someone who was a transvestite. Is that correct? I don't know if that phrase is correct or not. Versus someone who's anatomically changed. That's what I'm just trying to understand. I'm confused by the language that's being used in this discussion.
There are others in the chamber who may be more authoritative than I am at defining transvestite, but as far as I know, people who consider themselves transvestites do not consider themselves to be transgender.
Right, and that's my confusion.
For example, a man who considers himself to be gay and still considers himself to be a man, but who frequently dresses, etc., as a female might dress, would consider himself or be considered by others to be transvestite, but would not be considered transgender because that person still considers himself to be a man.
Okay, and that's where I'm struggling. And again, is that term, and I didn't spot it in the bill, is there a definition of transgendered in the legislation?
Just excuse me, my consultant advises me that a straight man could also be a transvestite and still be a man.
Right, so irrespective of sexual preference. So that was my understanding, but I guess I'm still confused. So my understanding is irrespective of sexual preference, if you're anatomically a male and you dress as a female, and for lack of any other phrase, and pardon my ignorance, I understood that was transvestite, and that transgendered was someone who took a more aggressive or affirmative stance in literally changing their physiology to reflect the state that they feel that they are, male or female.
I think the key fact is whether the individual considers himself or her, is what gender the individual considers himself or herself to be. And if someone who at birth was identified as male continues to consider himself male, then that person is not transgender. If that person's self-image is, I am now female, then whether that person has gone through hormone therapy or surgery, that person, I think, would be properly identified as transgender.
So thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the sponsor would continue to yield, I still am confused because I've heard different terminology and I struggle with the definition. So if I may, so if someone has, and I guess I would say if someone has changed their physiology and through hormonal or surgery, then physically they're a man or a woman physically, besides being their expression. They've changed their form to match their expression. Correct? Would that make sense to you? They've changed their physical form to match their expression if they've gone through the therapy and the surgery. Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense.
Okay,
yes.
so with that said, and I can understand and I know we've heard some concerns raised from my colleagues, so certainly someone who's changed their anatomy, their physiology, certainly there's, understandably, that person is now, by belief and by physical appearance, is that gender, whatever gender they have chosen to express, and then have been more affirmative with changing. And that's understandably that person who might have been a male is now a female by all appearances and by all expression. The piece that I'm struggling with, and so this leads me to my next question. So that person, of course, if that male became a female and then wanted to apply for a state program that grants certain benefits to females, such as the WMBE program, then they would clearly be entitled to that. I feel that makes perfect sense to me. What I struggle with is, and this is just from a matter of public policy, if the person who expresses himself as a female but is still a male, can that individual apply for and receive benefits under that state program? Would they be eligible to, and could they possibly be awarded benefits? I don't know. I'm just asking. This would be the male who is anatomically a male but is expressing themselves as a female. Are they then entitled to minority women business enterprise benefits through state-funded programs? Because I subscribe to the earlier indication that, yes, anatomically, expression-wise, you are female. Yes, you are fully entitled. You are now female. But this one I'm struggling with, so help me with this one.
Okay. Again, the answer is yes. Such a person, in other words, someone whose expression and identity is as a female, even though that is not what they were identified as at birth, and even though that person has not gone through hormone therapy or surgery, yes, that person would, for all legal purposes, be identified as female. As has been the law in New York City for many, many years, is the law in Suffolk County and Albany County. It was enacted in Minnesota 24 years ago. I mean, this is the law in an awful lot of the country and in most of New York State.
So if I may, if the sponsor will continue, so if I may, again, expression is state of mind. It's a sense of self, of being. It may be grounded in who you are physically, or maybe just your emotional, psychological expression, your projection of who you feel. Correct? That would be what we're talking about here.
Correct.
So, and again, I'm not a student of the human condition, but I think all of us, at one point or another, we've expressed ourselves in certain ways, and I guess my question for you is, so now we've granted the public benefit to the person who expresses as a female, but is not anatomically a female, has not made that, either was not naturally born or has not made that aggressive shift to become anatomically female. What if that person who is expressing themselves receives those benefits? What if they change their mind? How does that work? And they've been conferred state benefits over time. Could you see that potential, and how would that work if they stopped expressing themselves in that fashion?
I suppose you might.
How do we address that? As a matter of public policy and for taxpayers and for others, how do we address that?
Yeah.
I don't know myself. I'm just looking for guidance.
I suspect if there comes a point, let's say in an MWBE context, where a person, either because of their own internal change or because of some other factor, no longer qualifies, then they stop receiving the benefit. If it were to be determined that they were defrauding the program at some point, they could be prosecuted for defrauding it. Just as if somebody were to say, my ancestors were Native American, and therefore I'm entitled to a program that is to benefit Native Americans. If it later turns out that, you know, I was misled as to the identity of my ancestors, I guess at that point I should no longer be eligible for that benefit.
Yeah, so,
If it turns out I was lying all along, then I should probably be prosecuted for fraud.
So I follow your analogy to some extent, but the other one is documentable by lineage. There'd be some sort of lineage, and the issue of expression is a little more elusive. I'm just struggling with this, trying to understand. So how do we prove or disprove someone had a state of mind? But then, and that's my issue is a matter of public policy, because ultimately, if someone is expressing themselves in a certain way and they're not violating anyone else's rights, God bless them. Everyone deserves protection under the law and to be treated fairly and respectfully. My big issue is the issue of the conferring of benefits when there has not been that aggressive, proactive change that matches the physical with the emotional. And not for protection under law, but for conferring benefits and for use. And we heard some of our colleagues talk about the uneasiness about using facilities. Now, the only other observation I would have is, you know, maybe on this issue of the bathroom aspect, maybe we work to fund bathrooms that are no longer male or female, but have locking doors and separate private entries, and they're unisex, and people can go in and go out. They wait in the line, and they have their privacy. I think some of that issue would go away on this bill. But my biggest challenge right now is the issue of the expression, recognizing expression without the physical change to accompany could be fleeting or temporary, and I struggle with how we confer state benefits in that regard.
Well, I would just say,
other than protection from discrimination, that's a given. You get that, but
you know, if we were in the Minnesota legislature back in 1992, a lot of these questions might be on people's minds, because we would have been starting on a path for this country that nobody else had gone down.
Yeah.
But since Minnesota enacted this in 92, states that have more than half the people in the country have enacted similar legislation. Counties and cities that have substantially more than half the population of New York State have enacted this legislation. Major and not so major corporations have enacted this as their policies over a period of many, many years. And these things have not been a problem. And, you know, people who are concerned about defending MWBE programs have not expressed opposition to the bill. Barnard College has not expressed opposition to the bill. I'm not aware of us having seen opposition from the people that run the Curves gym. I actually don't know what their policy is on transgender women using their gym. For their legal sake, I hope they are welcoming. So I think a lot of these hypotheticals are just things that have not arisen and are not likely to arise. This is legislation that has worked well across this state and across the country for a long, long time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So again, my biggest concern as we get back to this legislation is not an issue of protection. It's not an issue of ensuring. I guess I'm out of time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're welcome.
Mr. Graff.
Will sponsor yield?
Certainly.
The sponsor yields.
Just so we can clarify this, Jeff. Now, the person doesn't have to dress like a woman, right? He can be dressed like you are or I am, right? And he just has to say, I identify as a woman, correct?
Well,
It's not a mode of dress. He doesn't present himself as a woman. He just has to say, I identify as a woman.
first of all, I know a lot of people with 2X chromosomes who dress a lot like you and me. And, you know, we let them into women's rooms and women's locker rooms.
Well, that's not the question. The question is,
But you're right. Mere attire is not the deciding factor.
okay. And now you create a crime here if, say, a transgender person goes to go into a bathroom of, say a woman's bathroom, and a father's standing outside, or a mother, and they stop them from going in while their child is in the bathroom. Under this legislation, they would be arrested. And charged with a hate crime, correct?
Well, I don't think blocking someone from entering a restroom is today one of the kinds of crimes that triggers hate crime status. For example, if you said, you're black, my white child is in the public washroom, I don't want you going in, I don't know that that would be a hate crime in New York.
With the intent to harass, annoy, right, threaten, or alarm another person. That's harassment. Okay, it's right here in your bill. And basically what would happen is with the gender identity expression, if they barred their way to the bathroom, they put their hands up and said, you're not going in there, my child's in there, right? Or if women are in the bathroom and a man walks into a woman's bathroom and the women start yelling at him and pushing him out of the bathroom, they're subject to arrest. Is that true? Or a women's locker room and in a shower, and all of a sudden a man walks into the shower, right, a woman's shower nude, and the women scream at him and push him out of the shower, they're all subject to arrest for a hate crime. Isn't that true under your legislation?
Well, again, I don't know whether trying to keep someone out of a locker room is one of the crimes that triggers the hate crimes law. That's number one.
I just read it to you. It's in the bill.
Where?
It's, let's see what page this is. Page 13, and go down to line 26. With the intent to harass, annoy, threaten, or alarm another person, or he or she strikes, shoves, kicks, or otherwise subjects another person to physical contact, or attempts to threaten to do the same because of a belief or perception regarding such person's race, color, national origin, ancestry, gender identity, or expression.
Okay.
And now it's an enhanced
Or
crime
sexual
because it's a
orientation, right.
hate crime. So under this legislation, if there's a parent inside a woman's bathroom and their daughter's in there, or a woman's shower, and their 5-year-old daughter's in the shower with them, or there's a bunch of kids in the shower, and the women push him out of the shower, push him out of the locker room, push him out of the bathroom, and say, I have a young daughter in here, you're not coming in here, they're subject to arrest. Is that correct?
Well, I don't think that meets the statutory threshold of harass, annoy, threaten, or alarm in that context. That's not the motive for the act in that case.
Well,
So,
no, they're
I don't think it's
prohibiting
covered.
him, right?
Excuse me?
They're prohibiting him from coming in there. They're
Yes,
using
but the
force to
purpose-
prohibit him.
But the sentence begins with an impermissible purpose.
Right.
It's not just pushing or shoving someone, it's pushing or shoving them for a certain purpose.
Yeah.
And what you've described doesn't meet that threshold.
And the purpose, okay, so if the parents are pushing this person out and he says, I identify as a woman, I'm allowed to use this shower, you know, I'm allowed to be nude in front of your 4-year-old girl, okay, right? And they say that's not happening and they push him out, then that fits this bill. It's under harassment, it's a hate crime, and they can be arrested.
Well,
it's pretty simple. It's
I can,
your
I can
language.
say 6 times that, no, it doesn't say that. You could say 6 times or even 12, yes, it does. But take my word for it, the situation you're describing doesn't fit the statute you're reading. But I would say, more significantly, that unless you've got some brand new piece of news that you didn't have last year or the year before or the year before or the year before or in all the times we've debated this bill, I always ask, has that happened? Did it happen in Minnesota? Did it happen in Suffolk County? Did it happen in Albany County?
Well, there are
Did it
incidents.
happen in
There are
Monroe County?
incidences where
I don't
that has
think so.
happened, Jeff. I'm sorry, Dick. I've seen it in the. I've seen it on the internet, different news accounts and everything else, and you have plain language.
Well, if it's on the internet, it must be true, I guess.
Well,
but
not necessarily, but if it's in a
it would be-
newspaper.
what I would appreciate it is if you're going to point to an example of someone essentially fraudulently claiming to be female and taking advantage of gender-type legislation to improperly go into a women's locker room or a women's bathroom, I'd like to see that. And so far, nobody's shown me that. Now, maybe you've got something that happened since the last time we debated it, and maybe I'll be surprised that in the 24 years and God knows how many states and counties and cities that this has been on the books for so long that, you know, now you have an example of this kind of abuse of the law, but I haven't seen it yet.
Well, you know, one of the arguments, it's not even an
maybe
argument.
you could email me the link, and maybe I'll have to apologize.
The
I'll
language
wait.
of the statute is so clear, okay? I mean, I just read you the language that's in your bill.
Yes, I
The
read it at
language
the
of
same
the
time.
statute, and
It
it
doesn't
cannot
say
be
what you think
defined
it says.
any other way, all right? It can't be defined any other way. So, I mean, that's what we're going to do. We're going to criminalize parents protecting their children.
No,
Yeah, on the bill,
On the bill, Mr. Graff.
this is seriously dangerous legislation, all right? I mean, you read the statute, and if you have a parent and you have a grown man walking into a shower, nude, and the parents turn around and bar him, especially when you have small children, right? They're going to be subject to arrest. They're going to be subject to a hate crime, all right? If women are in a bathroom and all of a sudden a man walks into a woman's bathroom and the women in the bathroom yell and said, get out, and push him out of the bathroom, they're all going to be subject to criminal prosecution under the hate crime statute of this bill. Is this really the road we want to go down? Okay? I mean, look, I have a granddaughter. I don't want a 16-year-old man coming into the shower at the beach when my granddaughter's there. I don't want them walking in on my daughters. You know, I mean, common sense has to prevail here. And this bill has been kicking around since 2002, okay? And they just keep recycling it and recycling it. And I talk to people in my district, and I think the women hate this legislation more than the men do. The men look at it as protecting their daughters. The women hate, most of the women that I've spoken to hate this legislation. You know, this is the one, not one time. All I can say is, thank God for a Republican Senate, because this is still not going to go anywhere this year either.
Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield just for one quick question?
Mr. Gottfried, will you yield? Mr. Gottfried yields.
Thank you, Richard. Just one quick question. Would an individual, male or female, that is on the sex offender registry list be banned from using a bathroom other than the one that coincides with their anatomical attributes?
If the person is protected, is covered by the gender identity and expression definition, that person would be entitled to use the restroom that coincides with that gender identity and expression. It has nothing to do with, with whatever their criminal history might have been.
Well, shouldn't it?
And by the way, that's the law right here where we're standing now, has been for several years. It's been the law in New York City for many, many years. It's the law in Mr. Saladino's county. It's the law in Monroe County. It's the law in a whole lot of places across the state, and has been for many years.
It very well may be. Thank you, Richard. On the bill, Mr. Speaker.
On the bill, Mr. Rea.
Thank you. Last year, the Court of Appeals overturned local laws regulating how close a registered sex offender can live to a school or playground. Maybe instead of debating this bill for the 5th time or maybe more, maybe we should be debating an issue that most people really care about instead of one that's currently being decided by the federal government as we speak. Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor yield?
You yield, Mr. Gottfried. Mr.
Yeah.
Gottfried yields.
Thanks, Richard. A couple of minutes ago, you talked about a deciding factor. You said that something was or wasn't the deciding factor. What is the deciding factor on somebody's gender identity or expression? I guess it would be how they perceive themselves at that moment, or is there something I'm missing?
I think if the matter were being litigated and the person said, well, that's how I felt at that moment, their sincerity and veracity might be called into question. But, you don't have a crisp, clear set of factors, just as, for example, in racial discrimination. How do we don't have any rule as to how many of your ancestors must be one thing or another.
No, actually, we do. And when it comes to...
I mean, you and I, half our ancestors were female. That doesn't make us female. You say, when I said we don't have a rule about how many of your ancestors
That has
have
nothing
to be
to
of
do with
one ancestry in order to be of a particular race, did you say yes, we do?
Yeah, we do. Sure you do. If you're going to claim to be an American Indian, like U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren has fraudulently claimed over and over for years and made a lot of money off of that. If you're going to claim that, you're supposed to be able to prove it. Because if I tried to do it when I was applying to college admissions, I don't think it would have flown. So there is a specific amount of your ancestry that has to be.
Half of President Obama's ancestors.
In order, wait a minute, it has to be.
Half
you have
of
to meet
President Obama's
really?
ancestors
Can
were
I
white.
finish? Can I finish?
So is he black or
Can
not?
I finish, Mr. Speaker? Can I finish? And then go ahead.
Okay.
For example, President Obama does claim to be African American, but he's half, right? So it's definitive. If I'm 2% American Indian, I can't claim to be American Indian and get casino money. So there is a percentage that you have to be. So that's number one. Second of all, you just said that the deciding factor would be your veracity or tenacity if it ended up in court. So a judge now decides whether somebody is transgendered or not based on their commitment to it as they're standing in front of a judge?
Well, there are a lot of things that, if perhaps literally push comes to shove, ultimately get decided by our court system. That doesn't mean that the law in question has some problem with it. Someone who, got attacked by a mob and says they attacked me because I'm Jewish, whether I'm Jewish might at some point come into question.
Right, but
There are people who might question whether I am Jewish. I don't know. There are people who might question whether my granddaughter is Jewish because, her mother is not. I don't know.
But that really doesn't have much to do with gender identity or expression.
Right.
And I think some of the problems we've had with this bill is it is a moment-to-moment thing that can change on a dime at a whim with no consistency at all. And one of my colleagues spoke very well about the potential here. And I know it may be a small thing, but there is potential that somebody bidding on a contract should say, I'm going to bid this contract right now because I'm going to self-identify as a woman, thereby qualifying for MWBE status. And how dare you question me, because at the time I bid, I perceive myself as a woman. And this bill would really prevent even the questioning of that expression or identity.
If that was a question, the answer is no, it doesn't.
How
And
does
no,
it then?
No, it doesn't. And in the history of this kind of legislation, no government entity has ever interpreted it that way, and the hypothetical you're weaving has never taken place. Nobody's ever ruled that way. This is complete fantasy,
Well,
unless you've got an example to show me.
oh no, but I hope I just gave a
this is
bunch of
not-
contractors
This is not the
examples to
first
take
time
advantage of it.
someone has proposed enacting this into law. It's been the law in a whole lot of places in most of New York State for an awfully long time, and your hypothetical has, as far as I know, and as far as anyone has ever said, has never, ever happened. And no, a momentary whim as to one's gender identity, as far as I know, or as far as anyone's ever suggested, has never qualified one under one of these statutes. Ever.
It's never not qualified anyone either under one of these statutes, has it?
I don't know what never not qualified anyone means.
In other words, this you're
I hold in my hand a cup full of isomers of water that don't exist.
no. It's not
Right?
about. First of all, it's
Don't
not
I?
about whether it
Looks
can
like it to
happen.
me.
It's not whether it has happened. It's whether it can happen under the language of your bill. You
And
actually
there's no way that it could happen.
There's every way that can happen if you read the language
Okay.
of your bill
I'll
in
say it
plain
3
English.
times, you'll say it 3
can
times,
and it
it's-
will happen.
Right.
That's our
Okay.
problem with this bill. What about the fact? What if?
By the
some-
way, if it could happen, don't you think some sleazeball would have tried it already?
Well, we've had many questions about sleazeballs gaining access to women and harming women as a result of this bill, and you continuously say you don't think that has happened, right?
Well, actually, I keep asking for someone to show me an example.
Ah, well, your wish is my command. Have you heard of Christopher Hambrook by any chance?
No.
Christopher Hambrook pretended to be transgender to gain access to 2 different women's shelters within a month of each other. He sexually assaulted a woman in each one. That was up in Toronto. That was in 2000, I think 14 or 12, that one was. Have you heard of Noel Crumpton
And what
Hall?
happened to him?
What happened to him? He went to prison because because he assaulted women, but he was
So
able
that's
to
kind of
assault
like
the women
saying-
because we granted him access
That's kind
because
of like-
he claimed to
like
be
saying-
transgender.
That's kind of like saying transgender people shouldn't be allowed to go into banks.
It's not like
because
that at
somebody
all.
who claimed
It's not
to be
like that at all.
transgender once held up a bank.
Don't twist my words. What I'm saying is we held the door open for this freak so he could walk right in and assault women twice, but maybe they're collateral damage. How about Noel Crumpton
No,
Hall?
wait a minute. No, you don't get to just throw out slander like that.
Really?
And just because you didn't put a question mark at the end, I don't get to say you're wrong.
Oh, okay, I'm wrong.
Okay?
They're not collateral
You're-
damage.
You're
They're just
wrong
victims.
because I don't even know that that guy claimed to be female as opposed to simply dressing up that way in order to get in. He
Pretended-
was breaking the law, and he would be breaking the law if this bill passes and becomes law, just as he was breaking the law back then.
No, he
By the
would
way,
not.
did he do it in a jurisdiction that had this law on the books?
No, he would not, sir. How about,
Did he do it in a jurisdiction that had this law on the books?
yes,
And
Toronto,
did he go
Canada.
to jail? Yes.
Yes. Who
Doesn't
held the
that
door
prove
open?
my point.
How about Noel Crompton
But
Hall?
that proves my point.
No, it does not. It proves my point that we held the door open for this guy to gain access to the woman because he claimed to be transgendered.
Gentlemen, we are in a question-answer mode as opposed to back at each other oftentimes, right? As heated as this argument may get, we still try to conduct ourselves in a...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You know, if there were no transgender law on the books in that jurisdiction, he could have dressed up as a woman when the people at the front desk said, you know, we only allow women in here, and he said, yes, I'm a woman, and then he went in and did rotten things. And he would get arrested and hopefully go to jail.
After.
And the fact that he did it in a jurisdiction that would have allowed transgender people to have access